you need. Some sequence. Now, I know that normally the sequence tells you to use those flat sequence, but we're going to actually use this just the regular sequence. So you can do it either way. Then the other thing you're going to need, let's go through my list, stabilizer. You can have a couple of different choices. The first one is you want to use a piece of Aqua Magic, and the Aqua Magic is what we're going to sew the poinsettias onto. You could use a cutaway, and this is actually a stitch point cutaway, and it just basically will be on the back of the card and it will stay with the card. You could also use the light and tacky tearaway, and this actually would attach to the back of your hoop. I have a piece of just red, and it's a red, and if you look at one side it looks a little bit different. It's just a piece of rayon, kind of a silky kind of rayon. You could use organza, you could use anything along those lines, but I wanted it to be real flimsy once I washed out the stabilizer. I have the 80 by 80 hoop, which is the size we're going to try and use. I have the 100 by 100 hoop. If you don't have an 80 by 80, you can use the 100 by 100 hoop. The other hoop I like to use is the 100 by 100 metal hoop. And if you have that, that's great. If you don't, you can still use one of the other hoops. So then the other thing you need is you're going to need some cardstock, and the one piece that you're going to put the poinsettias themselves on is a piece of cardstock that is 5.5 by 4.25. So it's basically taking a piece of cardstock and cutting it into a fourth. Then this is the piece that we're going to actually attach everything to. This way, by attaching onto here, you actually hide all the stitches. So that one is 5.5 by 8.5. So any kind of cardstock that you have, you can cut that down to be what you need. The thread colors, I used a red and white variegated for sewing the actual poinsettias, just because I thought it would give it a little bit of texture. I have a gold for sewing on the sequence, and then a green in order to sew the leaves. So that's kind of what you want to do there. I do have a marking pen to help me mark things, a glue stick. This is going to be important because it's going to make your life a whole lot easier by having that. I have two-sided tape. It makes it easier. You can still use the glue stick for certain things. I have a rotary cutter that's got the pinking blade on it. You can also use your pinking shears. Then my soldering iron. I know that sounds weird, and why would you use a soldering iron? But believe me, it makes it a whole lot nicer for cleaning up the very edges of all your poinsettias. So let's get started and actually pull everything up in the machine, and I'm going to be actually hooped a piece of the water-soluble Aqua Magic stabilizer with my red organza, or it's kind of more of a rayon-y kind of, it's a real silky kind of fabric, in my 80 by 80 hoop. And I like to hoop this kind of stuff because it is so flimsy and it just likes to tend to move, and I want to make sure that this doesn't move while I'm doing the sewing. Most of the time I do lay things up on top, but I have this all hooped, so I'm ready to go. So back. The other thing I forgot to mention, is when I come in to get ready to sew these out, I actually go to monochrome because I just want it to all sew all at one time. I use white bobbin thread. It's not going to be that big a deal. It's not going to be seen a whole lot. Now, if you were using something besides like this red, and I remember I'm using that red and white kind of variegated kind of thread, so it's not going to stand out terribly much. If you wanted to match your top thread and your bottom thread, you could do that too. But I'm just going to go make sure that's all monochrome and it's all going to sew at one time. Okay, so I have this all stitched out. It took about 6 minutes, maybe 7 minutes, and I'm all set, and I'm going to take this, and I'll take this all out of the hoop. And if you notice, they are all done. There's 3 of the larger, and believe me, they're not very big, and then 3 of the smaller. So I'm going to take this all out, and then I'm going to cut this all apart, and then I will throw this into some water and actually get rid of the water-soluble stabilizer. So what I like to use is these are Inspira scissors. I forgot to put that in the supply list, but they cut so nicely. Now you just want to get close because we're going to use that soldering iron to actually get rid of the real excess. And when I get that all done, I will be back. I know y'all thought I was crazy when I said something about a soldering iron when I'm doing embroidery. What this lets me do is once I've cut everything out and run it through the water and got rid of all the aqua magic off the back, I can actually, because this is a very lightweight fabric and it's almost kind of burns, so organza does the same kind of thing, and I can actually take that soldering iron and get really, really pretty close. So I've kind of done these, and so it's really pretty close. This one I had cut out, but I need to get really close into those stitches. See where the stitch, it's hard to see, I know the stitches. I want to get really close into those stitches. So to do this, I have a soldering iron and it's really hot, so be very careful. This is just a piece of ceramic tile that I picked up at a garage sale someplace along the line. They wanted to sell me the whole stack of them and all I wanted was one. So I got it for like a quarter. It just works for me. It actually started when I was doing wood burning. But so I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm going to kind of stand it straight up and down. And this is going to be kind of hard to see. I'm going to do my best I can to show you. But I'm going to actually just take this and I'm going to follow right along the outside edge of those stitches. But if you have it straight up and down, you're getting that tip really close. And then just keep going all the way around. And sometimes I end up burning it a little bit, but that's okay because that just makes the edge a little bit more distinct. So I'm going to continue doing those and get all 6 of mine done, and then we'll move to the next step. So I need to clear my workspace, and my workspace has all these flowers on it, and I need to get rid of that. So you can, on the Epic, my 80 by 80 hoop, and you could use the 100 by 100 hoop, or you could use the 100 by 100 metal hoop. So you could do a couple of different things. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. I'll use the 100 by 100 metal hoop so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to change this to the 100 by 100 metal, and then I'm going to take and I'm going to put the sticky back stabilizer on the tearaway stabilizer on the back of that, and that's that light and tacky tearaway, so it's not terribly heavy. And then I'm going to put my piece of cardstock on top of that and actually sew these out. So give me a sec. Okay, so I have my 100 by 100. I have my 100 by 100 hoop, metal hoop, and I put the light and tacky, and I've attached it to the back of my hoop. And I'm going to flip it over so you can see I used a little bit of blue painter's tape in order to tape it in place to keep it from moving. It's going to work fine for what we're going to do. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece of cardstock and I'm going to lay it on that sticky side of that sticky stabilizer. And if I put it on, I need to pay attention to where it's at. Now if I leave it right where it is, it's too far up and I need to get it down further so that it can be more centered, and so I can actually mark my piece of cardstock and do it, but I'm just going to kind of guess it and put it in there, and there it is, and it's attached. It is going to be attached there, and I put green. And so now we'll go ahead and get it sewn out. Again, it doesn't take very long, and then we'll do the next step. Okay, so I now have my 3 little leaves set up and they're all ready to go for my next step. So when I get ready to do this, I'm actually going to take each of these wonderful little red flowers and I'm going to actually take and I'm going to glue them with my glue stick so that I end up with something like this. It will make it a whole lot easier when I get ready to sew that out. So you see it's kind of, so my points are coming out to the outside edges, and then I can kind of place them where I want them. And then I'll go into sewing mode and actually use a sequence stitch to actually attach them all. So hang on a second. So just in case so to glue, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take one of my larger ones and I'm going to take one of my smaller petals and I'm actually going to take and I want to glue those together so that they don't shift on me when I go to add my sequence and add them to the card. So to do that, I'm just going to take, there's my larger one, I'm just going to set it there. I'll take the glue stick, just put a little bit of dab on the back. and then attach the two of them together. And you do want it to kind of dry just a little bit because you don't want your needle sticking to it. Now, one of the questions I always get when I'm embroidering on cardstock is what size needle do I use? Okay, I like a 75 or an 80 needle. That way you don't get the large huge holes, but I tend to use older needles, so I will go into my used needles stash and actually use those because it's cardstock. It's like cutting paper with regular scissors. You don't want to use your sewing scissors on regular paper. So that's kind of what I do. I'm using stitch number L70, and I lowered my needle so that it is actually in place, and I'm going to lower my presser foot so that it's nice and tight down on the here. And then I'm going to I just have an old needle that I'm going to use, and I'm kind of going to help hold that in place. I don't want to use my finger, and I'm going to just start to sew, and it's going to do a little knot first, and it's going to go over. And there it is. Now, okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut some of this away. So I'm going to cut around here. Now, that's what I like about these particular rotary blade with the pinking shears. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just use my straight edge, and I'm going to go in about a 1/4 inch, or this is going to be basically on what you think you want to do. So I'm going to actually cut those away, and then we'll do the next step. So I have actually created my little card here, and so now I'm going to take my green piece that's here, and all I have to do is, and I could glue in a piece of white and do whatever. I could actually go in, if I wanted to do this kind of like this, I could take my sewing machine stitches and actually put in Merry Christmas, but I think adding any more to that is going to make it not quite as pretty. So using that two-sided tape, and again, remember we have that sticky stabilizer on the back, I'm just going to lay a couple of pieces of the two-sided sticky tape, sorry about the strings, and actually attach it there. And I always initial on the back. I put in my initials, and then I actually put in the year that this was sent. So I hope to see some samples. Thanks.